Welcome to Casual Monday, week 12 of the fall 2024 season, the last week for several shows. Like I said in our last episode, I am unfortunately short on time for this video due to the holidays, but that enables me to give you a sneak peek of what next season's Casual Monday will look like. This has been a work in progress, and the current method is unsustainable. So, outside of some exceptions, next season I will endeavor to pick only a single point of focus or a single scene in each episode I choose to discuss. The hoped for result is that I can talk about more shows and do so in a more concentrated manner, putting my attention and the analysis on what I am most interested in discussing each week. Today, then, that is what we will have in store for episode 12 of Dan to Dan, Blue Box, and 365 Days to the Wedding. Girls Band Cry is our current rewatch choice, so it will continue to get more exhaustive coverage, a trend I expect to continue with whatever follows in its place. This upcoming Sunday, the 29th, will also see our second Viewer's Choice stream covering the anime Tsuma Show. That happens on Twitch at what we call the Block 1 time, which currently is 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Alright, let's begin, starting with Dan to Dan. Since we're basically left off in an extended split-core situation, what I want to focus on for this episode of Dan to Dan is the dynamic between Gigi and Okarun. Apparently all three were moved by our anatomical doll's romantic reunion, considering how they beg Seiko to allow Hana to stay at the house. But Okarun particularly resonated with Taro's bold proclamations and intends to emulate him, to the best of his limited ability. The early instance where Gigi picks lint from Momo's hair sees her react in the same flustered, bang-brushing manner as she has with Okarun, and that seems to be what kickstarts his erratic attempts at assertiveness. He believes Gigi his rival, and says he's decided he's going to fight adamantly, a contrast to the Okarun who slunk away from watching the two interact over the yogurt-flavored Pompi. But to Gigi, Okarun is Momo's friend and a fellow superpowered high schooler, and so why wouldn't he try to be his friend as well? And Momo, who knows about Okarun's lack of friends, sees a potential to expand his social circle. Plus, I feel like having someone else to share Gigi's attention might be good for her state of mind. Just after they beg Seiko on Hana's behalf, in fact, Gigi will gush about Momo's powers. But then, he'll turn to Okarun and gush about his powers and his wicked transformation. And if we watch Momo while Gigi compliments Okarun and even expresses envy over what he can do, she smiles. She is pleased to see this interaction. So when Okarun basically challenges Gigi by breaking into a song and dance routine, Gigi just joins in, and they inadvertently work together to annoy Momo and Saeko both. When Okarun learns the reason Gigi is here, and, thankfully, that he is also going to help with the exorcism, he'll be fired up, wanting to hurry and solve the problem so that Gigi can return home. Okarun is impatient for him to stop living in Momoka's house. He is basically saying that he wants Gigi to take a hike, but because Gigi only assumes that a friend of Momo's would be on his side, he takes Okarun's enthusiasm as charitable. It turns out it's hard to be a rival to someone who doesn't know you're in competition. When Okarun attempts to hijack the childhood friend's banter on the train, shouting his desire to talk about Tsushinokos, Gigi doesn't feel like he was rudely interrupted. Okarun's inexperience leads him to overcommit in tactless ways, but that's not unlike Gigi's own spastic randomness. He might even feel he's met a kindred spirit, considering how he reacts to Okarun's interjection. And while the intent was to steer Momo into a conversation where he feels confident, Gigi has a supporting antidote, a shrine in the very town they're headed to, and now Momo's attention is back on him. Okarun encounters the shrine that worships a mummified Kappa, but Gigi is especially interested in that, grabs the magazine and reads out something about Nessie, and suddenly both of them are nerding out. Okarun has a moment to realize that this is the most he's talked with anyone that isn't Momo, is shocked to realize he is having fun. And Gigi, in his easygoing way, praises Okarun again, wants to be his friend, has his own shock when it seems like Okarun is hesitant. But Okarun doesn't know how to parse the situation. He'll find himself wondering why Gigi isn't more despicable. If he's actually a good guy, then how is Okarun supposed to treat him? Okarun as an outcast is no doubt prone to thinking of people who are popular as different from him, maybe even that their natural state is antagonistic. Considering the treatment we've seen from his classmates, that doesn't seem like much of a leap. Aren't the social haves and have-nots supposed to be at odds? Aren't they supposed to dislike each other? Like two warring families who've long forgotten what grudge they bear, only that they're on one side and their rivals are on the other? That convenient simplification may be common enough in stories, but in reality, popular people are popular for a reason. They're likable, or friendly, or funny, or at least extraordinary in some way that others find magnetic. Gigi has some eccentric antics, but that kind of unself-conscious display looks like confidence, and is as disarming in its playfulness. He hasn't turned his nose up at Okarun or insulted him or anyone. In fact, he's quick to compliment or be impressed. Okarun wants to hate him and can't. He wants to compete with him, but Gigi seems oblivious. Okarun wants to fight, but what fight? Momo will conspire to leave the two alone and get her hot springs on at the same time, hoping that they can become better friends in her absence. And certainly that seems like the way it will go when Gigi recommends they play soccer. He's even teaching Okarun, encouraging him, treating it as no big deal when his pass goes astray. Gigi is just this happy, clueless, positive guy making a new friend, and Okarun has been silly to approach him as though he was a rival. And then Gigi straight up asks Okarun if he's in love with Momo. Amusingly, we cut away to her before getting an answer, where she is hoping they're getting along, convinced that she'd just get in the way of Okarun's first guy friend. Well, she has gotten in the way of the two of them talking about her. Okarun's answer is diplomatic. She's his friend, so she's dear to him. He respects her. His intentions are purely platonic, so far as Gigi needs to know, right? And Gigi repeats this, like it was just the answer to a passing curiosity, before revealing that he loves Momo's face and personality. Even looking back, I can't really tell if it happened before this moment, but Okarun's agreeing reaction makes it plain to Gigi that they both see Momo as more than a friend. He even sort of protests this reveal. You just said respect. Okarun says it's both, so Gigi raises with loving her eyes, and look at that, we have a full-blown rivalry after all. Now they cease passing the soccer ball like teammates, as Okarun rushes over to contend with him for it as they try to one-up one another. I'm not actually sure what the win condition for this would even be, but these two are on the same wavelength, and their back and forth raises make sense to them. Gigi expresses a kind of grudging respect for Okarun and offers his hand in friendship, but it's just a feint to pull him in for a headlock. You may not like it, but this is what peak male bonding looks like. And actually, I mean that. Two dudes getting in a fight and then being friends afterwards is one of those tropes based in reality. I guess it's just a variation on having a shared interest, something both care about enough to bother fighting or competing over. There's an alignment in value systems, something that they agree is worth the effort. As such, it's easy to pivot to working together if they find themselves on the same side of a conflict, another aligning of values. When Okarun realizes the house's exterior doesn't match what he saw on the interior, all talk about Momo drops away, and they're immediately a team focused on the task at hand. We don't get much further than breaking a hole in the room that shouldn't be there, a room that I guess was some kind of supermax prison for a spiritual entity. It's not going to be a very good prison with this new hole in it, I imagine, but considering what's going on with the Gigi's family, I have to presume that it had failed long before now. The room appears to be empty, after all. Now, presumably, these two will also be united when it comes to Momo being in trouble, but here I want to ponder a bit about the scenes intercut with the boys scrapping. I don't love that we are ending the season with Momo in a situation that looks like sexual assault, after we also began that way. The first one we can relate to her situation with the boyfriend, a supernatural echo to a mundane crisis, in the same way Okarun's lost bits and the quest to reclaim them relate to his own growing manliness. Without much else to go on, the implied sexual nature of the Gator's assault feels like just a way to turn up the danger dial. Now, it may be that we flip between scenes as a way of compounding tension, that Momo's story over here is in crisis, while the boys have the crisis over here of the strange room. But whenever you have adjoining scenes, it's worth pondering if there is a montage effect in play, that the imagery or actions in one are related to those in the other. I, at least, can't help but notice that it's only after Okarun and Gigi start fighting over Momo that we cut back to see the Gators show up to, well, fight over Momo, or at least do aggressive things motivated by a desire towards her. These aren't just random men, after all. These gray-skinned beings with overly large heads are scattered throughout the town. When Momo said earlier that she predicted the ghosts that were supposed to be haunting the house are in hiding, we cut to the outside where we can see their shadows across the path. This is the group that we were shown in the woods, and the implication is that they are the ghosts in hiding. They passed a few climbing the mountain, in fact, either without seeing them or without finding their appearance strange. I have to believe things are like that all the time in this village right now, but Gigi hasn't noticed. Gigi also hadn't noticed the giant, not quite matching white cube jutting out of the side of his house either, and while his parents have taken ill, he has not. Even after getting no sleep, he rather effortlessly makes the climb and seems no worse for wear. Without being told he was up all night, we never would have guessed it. That scene then, where the entity appears there in Seiko's house, coloring Gigi's room with its power color, stands out as an incongruity. If it's actually there, where Seiko has power, then why not bring that up? Why not mention at all that he sees the things in other places than his home? It seems to me that it isn't haunting his house, it's haunting him. As such, how many of these other strange events are happening specifically because of their relation to Gigi? His parents taking ill, the mediums he hired killing themselves, his town filling up with these odd beings, and now the assault on Momo. Is this entity behind all of these things? And does Gigi's subconscious or emotional state have anything to do with how its influence manifests? Well, we're going to have to wait 6 months for an answer. But I float the possibility for 2 reasons. One is just me trying to search for justification to put Momo in another sexually vulnerable scenario, and the other is my focus for today, the dynamic between Okarun and Gigi. If there is anything to the idea that Gigi's thoughts or feelings are influencing supernatural events, then their newfound friendship/rivalry suddenly becomes a plot element. Harmony or disharmony between the boys might impact the outcome beyond just the normal effect of working together versus being at odds. After all, there has been no shortage of supernatural events mirroring the human interactions to this point. I guess we'll see. This ended up being a particularly well-integrated episode. Great, where both the first and last scenes relate to one another, and that makes it rather difficult to pick a single thing to focus on. This was probably the first episode, too, where I really felt some hurt on behalf of the characters, with the realization that Chinatsu went through the entire thing believing Taiki had lied to her about the fireworks trip being a group affair. After all, why lie to her unless he was trying to spare her feelings? And if he's trying to spare her feelings, then it means he must suspect them, right? Or at least believes he shouldn't rub his dating life in her face, whatever that would imply. The time they accidentally spent together was bittersweet, because while she wanted to enjoy it, the belief that Taiki was there with another girl and pretending not to be cast a shadow over each moment. It's sharp enough that Nagisa can see the sadness on her usually stoic face when Chinatsu rejoins her team. So I think what I want to focus on is this matter of perspective, but through the lens of a new character, Karen. This is the showbiz girlfriend of Haruyu in the flesh, and what's more, she and Chinatsu are longtime friends. No wonder Haruyu asked Chinatsu in particular for help shopping that one time. Now, because we are in Taiki's point of view primarily, this encounter presents her as the girlfriend of his teammate, a teammate who knows that he is gunning for Chinatsu. When he introduces himself, he adds the link to her boyfriend. Upon hearing his name, her whole demeanor changes, first lighting up with recognition, and then a conspiratorial, "Oh, you're him," as she gives him the full once-over. Clearly, she is matching the image of him in the flesh with something she has been told in the past, and Taiki assumes it's something Haruyu has said. No doubt, he's worried that Haruyu mentioned his crush on Chinatsu. When Karen glances that way, pauses, and then says something about him having a lot of guts, Taiki is understandably skeptical. But she didn't spill the beans, and Taiki can relax for now. Chinatsu certainly made a weird face in there, but Taiki doesn't seem to have noticed. Then we actually follow Karen's point of view for a bit as she rejoins Haru, excited to tell him about the something good she just witnessed, Taiki and Chinatsu together. She says it didn't seem like a date, but the fact that she says that lends credence to the idea that she knows Taiki would prefer things that way. He seems like a nice guy. She thinks they should date. Haru, though, says there's no way Chinatsu wants that, and Karen begrudgingly agrees. Now, at first blush, it might seem like they know Chinatsu has no interest in Taiki and feel sad for him, but Karin instead starts fussing at Haru about what would happen if he ever started neglecting badminton. And in context, she means spending too much time with her at the expense of his sport. For her mind to leap to that, then, it must instead be that the reason Chinatsu wouldn't want to date is down to focusing on her own sport. A peek inside Karin's thoughts reveal that she believes her friend is overthinking things. We will catch up to Karin again, but this time, it's inside Chinatsu's thoughts. Where exactly this is in time, we don't know, except that it's after she started living with the Inumata family. Karin will ask her something similar to what Nagisa had said, about thinking of the guy she lives with in a romantic way. With her teammate, she played the whole idea off, but it seems Karin is a closer friend, for to her, Chinatsu will confess that yes, he is someone she could see herself with. She isn't even coy or timid about it with Karin. Instead, she just seems resigned. She sees him that way, but doesn't believe it will happen. With that, then, the earlier scene changes subtext entirely. Karin isn't sizing up Taiki as this guy she's heard is pursuing her friend, she's sizing him up as the guy her friend is into. She's looking over at Chinatsu for a clue on how to proceed, and Chinatsu is making a weird face because she's feeling the same thing as Taiki, a worry that her crush is about to be outed. Amusing to have both of them in the same state at the same time because of what the same person might say, and probably experiencing the same relief when she doesn't. There's one more aspect of Karin to take note of for my final thoughts. She is dressed in a yukata, and evidently is killing it based on Taiki's reaction. Hina is also in a yukata, and even the little lost girl Yume is in one, but Chinatsu is not. The scene where she has the flashback with Karin and confirms what we've suspected for a few episodes actually takes place inside a conversation with the little girl about the traditional festival attire. Chinatsu admits that there is a little part of her that would like to wear one, but she explains she's clumsy, so it probably wouldn't work out. This is how she transitions out of the memory, in fact, with the trailed off but qualifying her admission about Taiki. Chinatsu can see herself with him, but she's clumsy. It probably wouldn't work out. In fact, earlier, she told Yume that her version of Sunday best is her basketball uniform. She loves basketball, and when she's dressed for it, she just wants to be the coolest. And it's that thought of wanting to be the coolest that reminds her of confessing the situation to Karin. While Hina understandably wanted Taiki to see her in a yukata where she feels well put together, Chinatsu wants him to see her in her basketball jersey, as that's the place where she feels the coolest, and I suspect the most confident. I find myself wondering if Chinatsu has little confidence in her own femininity. I've mentioned before that she always seems dressed either for comfort or pragmatism. Her beautiful friend showing up in festival attire while she dons a simple t-shirt may have been a stark reminder. But if so, then starker still is the opening scene, where Taiki gives all the appearance of being on a festival date with Hina in her own yukata. It must seem like this is the kind of woman Taiki prefers. Someone who dresses up, who wears her hair in cute ways, who does a feminine sport like rhythmic gymnastics. Not someone in t-shirts with practical hairstyles that plays basketball. Like I said, this is the first time I've really felt hurt on behalf of our characters. It's wild that all that's required to change the situation is for either Chinatsu or Taiki to know how the other feels. But so long as there is this fear of what could go wrong, these hurts pile up. In trying to avoid potential discomfort, they are accumulating real ones. Oh, these two. For all their fretting over where they come up short socially and believing they don't understand human relationships, when faced with the prospect of Gonda suffering for their deception, they independently try to fall on the sword, trying to spare not just him, but the other. That's a neat trick for the finale, not just injecting the threat of the two separating when they seem closer than ever, but the reversal, which takes away any of the collateral damage to their scheme and lets them come clean. What I want to focus on today, then, is the two conversations near the end that mirror one another and the series as a whole. The first is the last stage of them unmaking their fake marriage, where they go out to divvy up the trash and recycling. It's not so much a back-and-forth conversation as it is taking turns piling up the grievances they have with the concept of marriage. The constant fretting and attentiveness, the conflicts that arise from differences in values, the need to deal with the other's family. Their own fakery was hard enough, surely real marriage would be even harder. Ohara concludes that it's fine not to get married, and Honjoji adds that it's already so much effort just to live on your own. They're matter-of-fact about the whole thing, as they separate their shared rubbish into the segregated bins, as though they were throwing away the concept of marrying itself in the process of disentangling their lives, preparing to return to their own spaces and their own paths. The series, likewise, has spent a lot of time highlighting the ways a marriage is not just the simple storybook ending of a romance. It was obligation and deceit in the case of Princess Claudia, a thing that actually stood between her and her love. It's an important community-binding ritual to Ohara's father, but one steeply in decline. It was an unequal partnership for Shinshi, whose own happiness was coming at the expense of his wife, and now his life is in disarray at this late stage. For Honjoji's mother, it was a mistake she made that caused them hardship. It was far more serious of a thing than Gonda had thought, the stakes higher than he was prepared to face at the moment it counted. And of course, there is their own experience of the inconveniences involved in living with someone else, the stress of having to be considerate of another person and sharing a small space. It is far more peaceful just to be alone. In all this, then, there is a demystifying of the ideal of marriage. And alongside that, I think the series is giving approval to the idea that marriage isn't for everyone, that it is indeed fine not to get married. It has drawbacks. It's not the obvious choice. If you're going to choose it, you should do so with that knowledge. And hence, the second conversation. Ohara realizes that calling everything quits will land them on their own versions of the straight, predictable path that their branch manager regrets walking for too long. And so he chases Honjoji down. Like the trash conversation, this consists of them taking turns adding examples to the same shared idea, that whatever else may be the case, they can get married if they want to. They don't have to be friends, they don't have to be going out. They don't have to have anything happen like a TV script or a fated encounter. Nothing about what they might have expected marriage to be has to be true for it still to be the choice they want to make. And I like that as the build-up to their mutual confession. These two are atypical in their own ways, insecure over how they differ from others, the way they don't stand out. Their situation isn't the same as many others, but that doesn't mean romance or marriage are out of their reach. It just means that their version is going to look a little different. Honjoji gushing about volcanic islands for 2 hours at a time is atypical, but that doesn't mean she can't get married. It means she has to find the guy who loves listening to her for those 2 hours. I thus really like the choice of showing us the branch manager's husband for the first time, and the way he rolls with her decision to go to Anchorage. We get a positive example of a marriage union right at the end when Ohara and Honjoji decide it's the path they want to take. It's a nice touch that they return to the spot where the scheme was first hatched for the proposal, as though they were retracing their steps to ensure this new journey starts out on the right foot, replacing the lie with the truth there, just as they will when confessing and then re-announcing their marriage to their coworkers. For someone like Honjoji who loves maps and tracing routes upon them, this feels like the appropriate blend of pragmatism and romance. This has been a cute and different rom-com to suit a cute and different couple. May their collections of rocks and spices grow for years to come. One last thing then, the mystery caller revealed. It's the coworker who joked about marrying Komiya way back at the beginning, possibly the reason Honjoji even came up with the idea. Going by the way he seems to look at Komiya in the ending montage, methinks he wishes she had agreed, wishes that it was his fake engagement that's turned into a real one. But normal, socially savvy people don't go in for that sort of thing, of course. It's all the ways Honjoji and Ohara don't fit the mold that makes their love story possible in the first place. And it's all the ways they've seen the illusion of marriage dispelled that give them confidence in choosing it anyway. These two conversations are the series in microcosm. The differences between them and other people allow them to view marriage with a skeptical eye the same way they view other social rituals and norms. They find value in it at last, not because of its mystique, or the approval of society, or the way it conforms to their expected life path. If anything, it's in spite of all that. It's the realization that marriage isn't an ending, but a beginning. Marrying one another is their choice because, when it comes down to it, there is no other path they'd rather start walking. It's the next line they want to trace on the map of their lives. About 7 minutes into this episode, during one of the many trips to the beef bowl spot, Nina will ponder what appears to be the most important question. How does Momoka really feel? I hoped you watched my video on the last episode, because I'm going to reference a lot of what I have already said. One thing was how a collision between Momoka's old and new bands suddenly seemed like a real narrative possibility, whereas before they were just the thing that led her to meet Nina, and part of her past that she didn't want to discuss. This episode, then, nudges that possibility further forward, putting the idea of being in competition with Diamond Dust into words. Mostly Nina's words, mind, but the expansion of the band with newcomers, far more popular than our original trio, jumpstarts the feasibility of doing something that actually resembles competing. And so, again, the question, how does Momoka really feel? Even though Nina is our main point of view character, I think it's possible that Momoka's internal crisis might be the more prominent conflict, at least in terms of how it shapes the plot. The climax of this episode involves the other four trying to maneuver around her, planning out how to pitch her on adding new members, or choosing something to aim towards. She is the linchpin of the band, and yet isn't interested in choosing a direction, doesn't think of herself as the leader, and seemingly has not decided how much she wants to invest herself into music this time around. In last week's goals section, I mentioned that it was odd not to have macro goals this far into the story, but that hearing Momoka talk about quitting Diamond Dust was the answer to the omission. She had a goal, fell short, and is seemingly gun-shy about choosing another. You can imagine how amused I was in this episode, then, to have Nina ask her point-blank what her goals are, and, as suspected, she has none. More precisely, I think, she wants to have none. No expectations means no disappointment. So long as she puts nothing she wants into words, she can continue to enjoy making and playing music only to the degree she feels like it from day to day. However, in a contest of wills between those with and without goals, the ones chasing something specific are likely to win out. The problem in our story, then, isn't that the other members have goals, but that the pursuit of them is likely to propel Momoka towards a situation she doesn't want to be in, and she has already quit once when faced with that proposition. If she can give up her band and friends of 3+ years, how much more easily could she ditch these folks she's only known for a piece of a season? At the same time, it seems like the decision to leave Diamond Dust haunts her, so she would likely also want to avoid quitting a band again if she can help it. Momoka is a battleground of wants and regrets, and that final shot of her on the balcony, gazing sadly into the distance, is a haunting one to me. Her turmoil is far from over. I'm going to restate some things I said last episode to make the next part more clear, without restating the reasoning. Momoka's behavior and her version of why she quit leads me to this conclusion. Something about what was asked of Diamond Dust as part of their label deal bothered Momoka more than it bothered the others, even though it seems none of them were keen on being unable to do whatever they wanted. Nobody wanted Momoka to quit, and supposedly staying together was the most important thing for them all. Despite this, Momoka felt quitting was her best option, and the others either wanted the label deal more than they wanted to stay together, or they were already under contract and were willing to put up with more than Momoka would. She was the one least willing to compromise. However, in the time since Momoka followed through on her conviction, she has come to regret it, potentially even doubting whether whatever she believed so important was as important as she believed it. The reality of losing the others and their shared journey has proven a heavier price than expected, and Momoka is thus in a very uncertain place. It's not just about her questioning whether she made the right choice in this specific instance, but a wider crisis around whether she even should care about something so much if it can lead her to this. This is why she can seem of two minds at times, encouraging Nina to speak her truth while trying to avoid her own, pushing Nina to put feelings into the performance while she keeps her own as bottled up as she can, and hounding Nina to join her band while also shrugging off the possibility of losing members. Subaru lays this out directly when she talks about the two Momokas, the one who is dedicated and serious about music, who wants to see if her songs resonate with others, and then the one who comes to her senses, who stepped down from music once already and wonders if there's any point in taking it so seriously. I compared Nina to a jealous lover in episode 4, that her newfound love of their band made her worried about the others' fidelity to it. This time, I might compare Momoko to someone pining for an ex-lover. At times, she remembers why they were a lover in the first place, and at other times, she remembers why they became an ex. So even though Momoko herself is in comparatively little of this episode, this is the main thing I want to look at today. See, one way to read the episode is that the other four's actions and words are echoes of Momoko's own warring psyche during her last days with Diamond Dust and up to the present. Sometimes the others play her role, sometimes they play the rest of Diamond Dust. We can see the same interplay of convictions and compromises, the same questioning of their importance, and the same tension between the fear of change and the necessity of it. It's a rather great way to introduce the Beef Bowl girls, who thankfully finally have names. Tomo and Rupa have their own dynamic, but each has some overlap with our existing trio as well, which helps to rapidly characterize them, and I'll make those comparisons as well. There is also a doubling of the plot, where in the first part, Rupa is trying to coax Tomos towards making a decision and approach the others, while in the second part, Nina and Subaru try to coax Momoko towards a decision to accept them. The first comparison to make, then, is between Tomo and Momoko. In each group, these are the people who need to be on board for any plan to move forward, but they are also the two most apprehensive of change. Tomo's initial reluctance to do anything except continuing to make music as a duo is just like Momoko's own reluctance to choose anything like a goal. She just wants to keep up their routine, practicing when they can, making songs, and doing shows. Each is somewhat comfortable in the status quo, or at least is more afraid of where a change may lead. Each also had some incompatibility with the professional side of the industry. Momoko quitting her band over whatever she found so untenable, and Tomo unable to find an agency she found compatible. They were both uncompromising in the face of agency pressure, though I'm unsure how Momoko would be now. And both were also part of a 4-piece band, presuming that that's what Tomo's picture with the reptile stickers is showing. From here, though, key differences emerge. While Momoko is the lone absent member of her original group, Tomo has Rupa sticking with her. I wondered last episode if things might be different for Momoko if just one more of the DD girls felt as she did. It's easier for her to conclude that she is in the wrong when everyone else was able to agree. While we don't know what happened with Tomo's group, she doesn't seem to have any second thoughts about her reaction to the agencies they met with, and she hasn't stopped trying to write and record new songs. And in that, another important distinction between them. Tomo has a goal. Presumably it was the goal of their original 4 members, to play at the Budokan, but she has not relinquished it. And because she hasn't, she is more willing to entertain a shakeup than Momoko is, more willing to take a risk. The future holds less terror for her because there's a future she wants to see. By contrast, Momoko seems only to have a future that she wants to avoid. In that way, Momoko is like Nina was back at the beginning. Nina had no goal, no dream she was chasing, she just didn't want to lose. She wanted to avoid a future where she was only a high school dropout, which is what led her to the city and the cram school. Momoko's own insistence brought her into the band, and now Nina has goals for days. She adopts Tomo's goal at playing at the Budokan because it serves her goal of feeling like they weren't losing to Diamond Dust. And to do that means going pro, and to go pro means attracting an agency, and attracting an agency means boosting their visibility and popularity. And all that is in service of 2 other goals: to compete with her ex-friend in Diamond Dust, and to prove to everyone that Momoko wasn't wrong, that her songs were just as good. Nina and Rupa have overlap here, each a cheerleader for the songwriter in their group, wanting them to get to their due or climb to the heights they believe them capable of. But in that pursuit, Nina ends up on a surprising path, behaving like Diamond Dust. Once Subaru puts Nina's goal into words, to beat Diamond Dust, she explains the difficulty. They're pros with an agency behind them. To even the playing field, Nina researches the process by which one becomes a pro, and she must be motivated indeed to return to the venue owner for advice. He explains the shift towards contacting bands that are popular online, and so Nina takes that as the next step. Become more popular online. Thus will she suggest cuter outfits for their next show, or uploading pictures of Subaru mugging for the camera in her uniform. Even the intended joke of all of them wearing school uniforms has Nina considering a moment. When Subaru points out that this thinking is the same as the current Diamond Dust, Nina doesn't balk. This is kind of shocking in light of last episode. Nina hated how DD changed for mainstream appeal and accused her friend of being someone superficial. She picks their stage outfits specifically to proclaim their ugly truths, their authenticity, a challenge to the fabricated image of DD. How can this be the same Nina? The answer lies in the earlier part of the episode. After their time in the sauna, Nina and Subaru read out reactions to their performance. Momoko really is Diamond Dust. Her new band's way more rock than the current Diamond Dust. In conclusion, the audience likes the old Diamond Dust better. This felt like a triumph to Nina, and she waited for Momoka to feel the same because she wants Momoka to believe she made the right decision, that she wasn't wrong. And so, Momoka asks if she wants to make a post trashing DD as posers, asking others to support them because they're more authentic. Nina is surprised that she doesn't want to. But rather than explaining to Nina the reasons she's not interested in trashing her old band or even competing with them, she asks her to look at the difference in their followers. Nina believed that their authenticity in the face of DD's artifice meant they were winning, but now Momoka has reframed it in terms of popularity. I don't think it was Momoka's intent to do so, more like a way to shut Nina up, but Nina seemingly now believes that some other way is required to beat Diamond Dust and prove Momoka right. This ends up being a good example of why I think discerning character goals and the order of those goals is an important aspect of analysis. We might have believed that Nina cared the most about authenticity, about believing that their way is the right way, and so compromise isn't an option. She may indeed think that, and putting her real feelings into her performance is no doubt still a goal, but it turns out beating Diamond Dust is the higher goal in her own accounting, and so she's willing to use the same playbook to get there. I imagine a similar priority mismatch was at work in the old Diamond Dust dynamic. Momoka and the other three probably had similar goals, similar principles, and so long as they didn't have to choose between them, they could easily believe that they were all in sync. But when a conflict arose, the order of Momoka's priorities was different than the others, and so things went the way they did. As stubbornly uncompromising as Nina has seemed throughout the series, there is clearly a hierarchy to that stubbornness. Likewise, as much as Momoka may claim that DD's top goal was to keep the band together, the outcome says otherwise. We just don't yet know if it really was her or the others with the mismatch. Now, Nina will compromise a lower goal for the sake of a higher one, but she is still, in general, a very uncompromising black and white thinker. She digs in her heels, or else charges straight ahead, every much the bull Subaru accuses her of being. She's always convinced that she's right. That aspect of her we might instead compare to Momoka of the past, who likewise had some reason she quit Diamond Dust rather than accept whatever she was asked to do. That comparison is one of the more interesting ones to me, because the show is more likely to repudiate Nina for her dogmatic ways than it is to reward her. Take this episode, for example. She wants to beat Diamond Dust, both for her own grudge and as part of proving that Momoka wasn't wrong. Because of that, she'll present the reactions to their performance, convinced of victory, only to find Momoka unimpressed. When she suggests the cuter outfits and all that to build their followers with the goal of turning pro, Momoka wants to know when exactly that became their goal. They'll fight about it, and end with Momoka facing away from Nina, even further from being in alignment. When Rupa and Tomo approach them about joining up, Nina immediately wants to pitch the idea to Momoka, convinced it's the right move. Subaru has to talk her down and persuade her to try a different tack, one that ultimately does work. And so, if the way events unfold suggest Nina has the wrong approach, then what should we infer about Momoka's past decision? That her own unwillingness to compromise was likewise the wrong approach? I certainly suspect that's what's been going through her head, that whatever conviction she originally held has faded out, and this confused, sometimes sorrowful Momoka is what remains. Even their dynamic might call Momoka's methods into question. She was the prime instigator, shaping Nina into someone who would stop running away, and instilled in her the value of putting her real feelings into her words and song. And now, that version of Nina is the one who butts heads with her, and causes friction within the band. Maybe it feels right to hold fast to what you believe is true, but a band whose members never compromise will not be a band for very long. Like many good works, though, Girls Band Cry does not suggest a single answer to this tension between compromise and authenticity. As it happens, the authentic and honest parts of their performance seem to be the very things that resonated with Tomo. Nina had talked about wanting to make a mark with their performance, and in this episode, we see Toma circling back to a video of it repeatedly, picking out a keyboard accompaniment at one point, and seemingly daydreaming a bit while at work. When Rupa later explains why they approached them, she'll say they realized Nina's trio only sing what they want, that they'd voice their opinions. The notion that they would be uncompromising is thus treated as an asset rather than a liability. It's attractive enough to bring 2 new members into the fold. Nina's stubbornness also contributes. The actual exchange that prompts Tomo to approach them is the one she overhears between Subaru and Nina, which begins with Subaru questioning the desire to suddenly go pro. Nina admits that it's not that simple, and she isn't really convinced they'll beat Diamond Dust, but she hates admitting defeat and giving up from the start because they aren't wrong. Nina knows her conviction is unreasonable, but stubbornly holds to it all the same. Presumably, that also resonates with Tomo, and for all that this trait of Nina's has caused problems, in this instance, it tips things into their favor. But it wasn't these things alone. Rupa's efforts to persuade Tomo have been ongoing, starting all the way back in episode 3 when Momoka gave her their card. I've spoken about Subaru being the drummer of the band beyond just the instrument, that she seems to be the one most likely to help move things along or smooth things over. So I was, of course, interested to see if her fellow rhythm section counterpart would serve a similar function, and she does. Rupa purchased both their tickets to the show, and keeps a little pressure on Tomo throughout the first part of this episode, which I'll come right back to. When the 4 of them meet in the little cafe, and when they return to the apartment, Rupa does most of the talking, and smooths over some of Tomo's more prickly replies. Throughout it, she maintains a patient pleasantness, and it's rather obvious why she's the one who interacts with customers at the beef bowl spot. Returning to her pressure on Tomo then, like I said, we have a doubling of the plot when it comes to convincing the key members in each grouping to work together. It's interesting then that the 3 doing the convincing all have different ways of going about it. Nina wants to charge right at Momoka, wanting to call her as soon as they've met with Rupa and Tomo, wants to tell her the entire truth after Momoka listens to their work, and immediately admits their intent to join up as soon as the jam session is over. Subaru, with great effort and some karate chops, convinces Nina to let her try a different way. Going back to the idea of 2 Momokas, Subaru knows she has to make the pitch to the musician, and so obscures the end goal with a little half-truth and arranges with the others to play the song from the concert. Nina would plunge into the bush after her prey with spear in hand, while Subaru would rather find tempting bait and disguise a trap. Nina chooses truth and aggression as her approach, while Subaru prefers deception and patience. Rupa, then, is a mix of these. The things she says to Tomo are truths, like her desire to find a vocalist that can sing a melody Tomo wrote, and her own desire to try forming with the others. She'll voice the thoughts she believes Tomo is having, a fear over losing what they have, a preference for the status quo over potential suffering, but will remind her that keeping up the poster proclaiming the Budokan goal is absurd if she wants to stay that way. And when Tomo asks her if she thinks it'll work out, she doesn't give hollow reassurances. She doesn't know, as close friends can split up, and incompatible types can somehow stay together, though she does believe the other 3 are a good fit for her. So, truths like Nina, but patience and diplomacy like Subaru. She brings it up and touches it often, but is content to let Tomo get to an answer in her own time. So, in allowing these different strategies to meet with success, the story also isn't picking a winner, a right or wrong way to be when in pursuit of a goal. Yet achieving that goal isn't the end of things. How does Momoka really feel is still an unanswered question by the end of the episode. In fact, it's exactly what I'm wondering as we linger on her in the last moments. If I'm understanding correctly, the festival they are aiming towards will also be attended by Diamond Dust. The chance of a meeting between Momoka and her former bandmates is hanging tensely in the air. And Momoka is out there alone, heavy in her thoughts. A light stream of purple lines seems to blow inwards with the wind, reminding me of the colored lines in the 5-person practice session. In that context, it seems to represent the wall of sound, Nina's perception of the fullness and variety of the music played by a full complement of instruments. Then, it was myriad colors, solid lines, energetic movement. But now, from Momoko, there is one color only, solitary. And not only are the lines slower and comparatively listless, they are at times broken into smaller fragments. They have formed this 5-person band, presumably have taken yet another step towards being a recognized and successful group, but the last scene suggests no unification at all. I wasn't even aware Momoko was in the scene until the end, as she isn't just standing apart from the rest, she's outside of the apartment. And within the apartment, the groups are split as well. Rupa and Tomo in one room, with Nina and Subaru in the other. Now, if we keep up the pattern of the series so far, then next episode should end with another performance. If so, presumably it is these 5 at said festival. And in fact, even if that's not in the next episode, it seems to be where we're headed. To this point, all of the performances have been a victory of some kind or another. The first one introduces Nina as a singer and stops Momoko from leaving town. The second one empowers Nina towards becoming someone who can speak her truth and feel confident in performing. And the third one demonstrates their chops as a band, in a real concert environment with a discerning crowd. But should we assume that all the performances will be a success of one kind or another? And if not disaster, could they sometimes be a mixed blessing? I don't think Momoko wants to run into Diamond Dust at all. Whatever went down severed some real ties. Remember that there was no one to see her off for her last night in town. Whether there is actual bad blood or it's just a case of crushing guilt, I believe Momoko would rather be invisible wherever Diamond Dust is concerned. I believe her when she says she doesn't hold a grudge, but I also think she isn't really interested in beating them in any manner. I can actually imagine that she wants them to succeed, because then at least her turmoil would have served a useful purpose. If she quits and they fail, then what did this pain accomplish? If Momoko thought she made the right choice, then it's different. She could believe that their failure after compromising proved her convictions right. And if she could prove successful in another band with no such compromises, then it would prove doubly so. That is certainly Nina's mindset in all this, but it's not what Momoko seems to believe. I think she's fond of her former friends and bandmates, feels guilty over whatever transpired, and would never want to succeed at their expense. Thus, at this festival, there is the potential both for Nina to run into her ex-friend and Momoko to run into her ex-bandmates, and any such encounter could prove disruptive to their performance. Since our fivesome is the one with something to prove, this is far riskier for them, and yet Nina's bullish competitiveness doesn't take that sort of calculus into account. This episode, on paper, should feel like the final assembling of the team, something victorious, and instead, all I feel is apprehension over what comes next. And that's really down to, well, goals. It's most of what we talked about, but to recap, Tomo had a goal of playing at the Budokan, and Rupa basically supports her towards that end. Nina adopts that goal herself as a means of achieving her desire to feel like they weren't losing to Diamond Dust. Subaru just likes to bang on drums, and so she's amenable to doing it on such an auspicious stage, but Momoko specifically has no goals. It's a telling scene when the other 4 make the impromptu visit to the Budokan, their visions aligning, while Momoko isn't just absent, she's unaware the other 2 are anything but the Beef Bowl girls. But those without goals will be dragged along by those who have them, and in this case, towards something I think she wants to avoid. Which, then, is what I would add in conflicts. A potential interaction between Momoko and Diamond Dust feels like a powder keg awaiting a spark. A potential interaction between Nina and her ex-friend is like a finger hovering over a nuclear launch button. They need this festival opportunity to boost their chances of attracting an agency and everything that would enable, but attendance is fraught with peril. I will make another note here, too, the background conflict of Subaru living a lie. We got a little bit showing that she uses a stage name, a Playa-chan, and she does so since she can't have her grandmother finding out. Touching that fear again means we should keep it in mind. When Tomo ends up being a huge fan, and seemingly putting it together with Subaru's last name, then we can probably downright count on it coming to a head at some point. Though I guess I could say here that my broad expectations for the series is that there's no way these five are still together at the end. I just don't yet know which stressors or priorities will form the details. In characterization, a lot of work went into the initial picture of Tomo and Rupa. It's consistent with the small bits we'd gotten before, but helping us understand how they relate to the subject of music is an important element to integrate them into the overall story. I thus rather like that the episode does not rush right into their fateful meeting right away, saving it until somewhere after the halfway point. Seeing their two-person interactions and what it looks like when they work on music together gives us something to compare with their dynamic when our original trio is added on. Like normal, though, a lot of what I've talked about is characterization, so we're not going to repeat all of it here. In world building, there are some interesting data points shared for perspective. Our trio's one performance has earned them an online following of around 500, though dropping. Diamond Dust is at 20,000 and evidently on the ascent. The venue owner says they were around 10,000 in their indie band days, so I assume a lot of that climb is recent and due to the visibility afforded by their agency. Alongside that, Beni Shoga, Tomo and Rupa's little group, has an online following of 22,738. That's higher than Diamond Dust as of this moment, though I expect that to change. However, since they don't draw a crowd by their own admission, this seems like the result of a dedicated effort towards their online presence. They'd had some kind of viral hit that Nina and Subaru recognized, after all. I wonder then if their savvy in this arena will be a difference maker in the pursuit of their goals. Pairing that experience with the ability to put on a charismatic, full-band live performance might make the prospect of competing with Diamond Dust a little less of a pipe dream. Subaru also helpfully exposits the advantages of festivals, another way to get on a producer's radar to go with the previous explanation of online popularity. It seems like we introduced multiple paths towards success and multiple tools to pursue those paths. Now they just need to choose a name. In theme, then, I want to reiterate the making a mark idea from last time. I saw that as an expansion of the ongoing conversation around a song's impact, what goes into it, and what individually takes out of it. Nina channels that desire to make a mark into her performance, and in this episode we see Tomo repeatedly coming back to their song. Since they later explain about the sense of Nina's group saying what they want and voicing their opinions as why they were interested, it sounds like someone got out of the song exactly what Nina was trying to put into it. In contrast, though, I talked last time about the tension between authenticity and fabrication, with our trio and Diamond Dust representing the idea, respectively. This time, Nina is happy to abandon that version of authenticity if it means competing. And while coming straight out to tell Momika about the other two would be the more authentic way of trying to bring them together, it's a more circuitous and fabricated method that wins the day. It's an interesting counter note to Toma and Rupa finding them an attractive option because they perceived their honest messaging. Humans are complicated, it turns out. Finally, in one way or another, each of these five is driven by some event or choice in their past, and there's a sense of drawing increasingly close to a reckoning. Subaru and the live acting school, Nina and her ex-friend, Momika and Diamond Dust, and the new pair with their past goal towards the Budokan. Interestingly, all of these could interact with one another, or even culminate simultaneously, and I think each has both very good and very bad potential outcomes. In the interim, however, the way they influence the behavior and choices of each member is a big part of the churn in their relationships. The longer they perch unresolved, it seems, the greater the potential fallout. And so with that, I will wrap things up for the week and sit with great apprehension towards the next. Bye, guys.